You are listening to Art of Semi-Fiction. I am Robynne Miller.
And I am Jane Daly.
And today we are going to be talking about some tips for tighter, more powerful writing.
Ooh, that sounds great.
I'm thinking...
What is tight writing?
Tight writing. Back in the day when you read like tomes of the greats, back way back when lots of words were everybody's friend, right?
Those big fat novels.
You wanted to like almost be able to carve them out and live in them on a weekend. I mean, just really big, meaty kind of pieces of writing. But we've changed.
Things change.
Cultures, kind of, what's in vogue in literature has changed. And of course, the internet and tweeting and everything has made
140 characters.
Somebody knows exactly how many characters you can have when you're tweeting.
I can tweet.
But everything has gotten to where we need to cut out some of the fluff and we need to go to the heart of the matter.
Right.
So clean writing, you'll hear these words: clean writing, tight writing, focused writing. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's a way of making your writing as powerful as it can possibly be, as compelling, but also as efficient. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that there's no place for, description and loveliness too.
But you have to have description and senses and all that.
Yes. So would you consider yourself, when you're doing a first draft, because I know, because you again write both fiction and nonfiction, do you feel like you're equally kind of as tight out of the gate? So your first draft of fiction, your first draft of nonfiction, you're equally tight, or do you think you kind of wander with one a little bit and have to rein it in and craft it and pull it back? Or do you think that both of them are need a lot of editing?
Really such an awesome writer. I don't.
She is actually, I can't even argue. I'd love to argue with that, but I can't.
I just don't struggle with that. No,
wordiness.
It's not that I write tight out of the gate. I tend to write too minimal, but I overuse words, and that's part of what I know you're going to be talking about is those overused words and phrases. I have a tendency to use the word just. I'm just blah, blah, blah. She just, and those are things that need to be tightened up.
Absolutely.
So for other people, so I know that there are people who will first draft is 120,000 words.
Yeah,
and they really need to tighten. That's not me. My first draft is like squeaking in at maybe 85 to 90,000, and I have to expand it. But there's still that element of having to make sure make every word count. Is what I think we're going to be talking about.
Because a lot of people do get caught up with the word count issue, but if you have 120,000 and everyone's important, they may need to stay. And if you have 90, but half of them have no value, then you really only have 45,000.
You have a novelette.
Pretty much. So we're just going to talk. I mean, there's a million tips for tighter writing, but one of the things that that I am really passionate about is figuring out not in general what you're really writing about, but specifically to your actual piece. And you would be surprised because again, we both teach writing, and we're both in writing groups, but I also am a writing coach, and I do a lot of looking at people's writing, and I'm thinking, what is your point? I mean, it might be beautiful writing, but I can't find the theme or the point in it. And when you put that to a person. So what did you want to say with this piece? Mm-hmm. If their answer is, I don't know.
And I think that's really, what you said. So going back to me, so in my work, I know what I know what I'm writing about.
Yeah.
Which is not a problem. But when I blog, sometimes I just kind of ramble like, oh, everyone wants to hear my thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's been pointed out by certain people who shall remain nameless.
But if you were seeing the visual of this, you'd see her pointing at me and me receiving that.
My critique group will say, what is the point? What is this blog about? What are you trying to say? And that's where the tight writing comes in.
Absolutely. Because everything that you write, whether you're doing a short something like a blog post, or you're writing a larger project like a novel, everything has got to do some work.
Right.
So we mentioned several times one of our writing friends who writes so beautifully, her description, because she's a painter in real life, and she just paints with words. But for the longest time, they weren't really serving her story. They were beautiful, but there was no real point to have them other than just pure delight in the gorgeousness of her words. Now she's down the road in her writing, she's combining the beauty of her skill with description.
Oh, and you can see it.
With purpose.
Now you know what the book is about.
Exactly. So just thinking about what you want to say, just getting that in your mind. What is your point? What is your point for that scene? What is your point for that chapter, or your blog post, or your whole book, whatever it is? If you can't articulate it, you're probably going to be writing around it, dancing around it. You might have sort of a kind of an almost feeling about what you want to write, but you're not going to be focused in. So learn think about what you want to say, make sure you can articulate it.
Make every word count. I was talking with a gentleman who is a musician, and he said, every word of a song is, just think of it as it's worth $1. And so you only have so many dollars.
Yes.
Because songs are so tightly, really, if you want to study tight writing, look at songs.
Yes.
I wish I could write a song. I wish I was a songwriter, because when you hear a song that every word points, it gives you goosebumps.
Yes.
Some of the songs out there are so incredible.
They tell a story
powerful.
in just a handful of words. They can take you on an emotional journey in just a few sentences.
That's tight writing.
That
is tight writing.
Absolutely. Okay. So once you know what you want to say, then another musical analogy actually is a friend of my husband and mine is a composer. And if you think about, if you're a composition student and your instructor says, give me a composition, most people will just stare blindly at them. But if you say 32 measures in a minor key in the style of Bach, kind of thing, now you've got, now I have a direction. And you can still get, if you have 100 people in that class, you'll get 100 different compositions. But now it's got purpose, and there's something about it, an upbeat piece of music or a slow piece of music. It's the kind of the same thing with writing. If you are just saying, I'm going to write a novel, that's kind of wide. That's a big lot of possibilities there. Narrow it down so that you know what you're writing about, and your first draft is going to be really what somebody else's 15th draft would be, because you're going to have a purpose for it.
Absolutely.
So another just super simple thing to do is to eliminate trite and overused phrases.
Yes.
So if you say something like a sentence, personally, I believe war is wrong. Personally doesn't need to be there because you're the one talking.
Right.
So you don't need it. And I believe doesn't need to be there. Now, if I said, personally, I believe war is wrong. Blah, 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 lots of words there.
What was the point?
War is wrong.
Okay.
Now
Do you really believe that personally?
Well, not personally.
Oh, okay.
Publicly, I believe. No.
Okay.
But do you see the difference?
Yeah.
Saying personally, I believe war is wrong. War is wrong. Which one has more impact? Which one has more gut punch? And it's not just because, I don't want everybody to start writing in haiku, so we only write in Twitter, a whole novel in Twitter account of characters, which is 144, as you keep reminding me.
140.
Isn't it 144?
No. That was the 144,000 who were going to be in the new heaven.
See?
I'm the numbers. It's 140.
Okay, I give you're the Twitter queen. So, but do you see the punch when you take?
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Someone along the line is probably going to say, "But they just doubled the character count." So, any of you who feel like you want to make a comment, don't.
That would be words that we don't need to.
Okay, go ahead.
Eliminate trite overused phrases.
Yes.
But there's a lot of things where you just don't need to see. It seemed to me that she was unhappy. Just write, she was unhappy.
She seemed unhappy. Yeah,
or something like that. So you're all those phrases, or suffice to say, or those old weird kind of phrases that we say when we speak, when we don't know what else to say, to kind of fill in the gaps. Don't use them. Yeah. Don't use them. And along that line, eliminate unnecessary words. If the sentence does not need a word, take it out.
One of the biggest things that I see new writers do is use the word that.
Yes.
She saw that there was a cat outside. No,
yes.
She saw there was a cat outside. You don't need the word that.
Yes.
We speak it and we don't necessarily hear it, but in our writing, we don't need it.
Yes. One of my big tips for writers is to start a list. I put it on a Post-it note of the things that you do like this.
Mm-hmm.
So before you're going to submit to your critique group or your writing partner or an editor, agent, whatever, go through this list and put that on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of those things. So if you have Microsoft Word, all you need to do is go to the Find tab in and put in that, and you'll see how many.
Oh yeah.
I'm famous for this. If I see a word being overused in somebody I'm critiquing, they will get a word count. Did I tell? I mean, every time I do a word count. I mean, every time I do a critique with Jane, she's like, "You're counting my she's. You're counting my." But you need to know. You need to think about if you overuse a word. Really think about how can I not do that in the future, and part of that is checking. Sometimes I don't like to stop myself. I used to overuse ly words.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that now. Years down the line, but there was a time when I did, and that's one of our things. Don't use a lot of ly words if they are modifying your verbs, because that means you're using too weak of a verb. So if she walked firmly, instead she tromped or stomped or she
strode.
Exactly. You usually, if it's modifying a verb, then what you're doing is you're using too weak.
You're getting lazy.
Yeah, it's too weak of a verb. But for a long time, I was the queen of ly words. So I had on my list to just hunt for ly words. And there were a couple that could stay in there. That was all right. But most of them, it was because I had not chosen a strong enough verb. So keep that little list. That is a tip.
Well,
keep that little
not
list.
Just words, but also phrases. Because
Yeah.
I remember we're going to have to talk about self-editing at some point. But when you're editing your work, pay attention to things like people shrugging or people cocking their head, because if they're cocking their head once every page, that's a little too much cocking of the head.
Or tears sliding down cheeks.
Yeah, just phrases that you use constantly.
And that other people use constantly.
Yes, you need to
find a fresh way of saying it.
Exactly.
I may or may not just have had my agent say that in a hook for a proposal that I wrote. She said, "This is all true, but it's been used. These phrases and these words have been used. We need to find a fresh way of saying exactly the thing. I was saying the exact thing, but I needed to say it in a little bit fresher way." So
even just using similes or comparisons, if you can change it to something that hasn't been used, then you've tightened up your writing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one kind of going along with that is staying away from tropes. Do you know what a trope is?
No.
Use a big word. I just want to put you on the spot because in a recent podcast,
I am publicly shamed right now. I've heard the word. I kind of know what it is, but I didn't want to give.
That's my master's degree speaking now.
Yes, thank you.
A trope is basically something that is indicative of either a genre or a kind of writing that is instantly recognizable. So if you're writing, for example, it was a dark and stormy night, right? Mm-hmm. We already know that is not going to be a how-to, upload on YouTube.
Okay.
Right? That's a trope for something mysterious, maybe a murder mystery, something with tension. Once Upon a Time is a trope.
Tale.
Yeah. Using words that would instantly be recognizable, but they've just been overused. So any trope is those things, the style of something, or the phrases or the word choices that, if we see a murder, or not a murder, I never ever watch like chainsaw killing movies, or I don't like scary movies at all. But if you were to say to somebody, I want to see a movie, and there's some, storm is going on outside, and some guy's looking in at the window. So, and then things start happening. So they went to the basement, or they went up to the attic, instead of getting away in the car. They thought they'd hide in the, you're like, that's
really,
so
that's a trope.
It is a trope because it has been done. It's
okay.
predictable. It's been done. We know, or if I said, I have a movie about this, what kind of movie do you think it is? Well, if there's a storm outside, some weird guy looking in the window in a mask, and you're in the basement, okay, I'm thinking it's Freddy.
It's a horror movie.
It's a horror flick, right? So you stay away from those, because all that really is doing is it's clouding your writing. It's not being strong. It's not being fresh. And most of the time, the once upon a time, and it was a dark and stormy nights, don't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
You need to really be accurately and freshly looking at your writing. Big one, show, don't tell. You're going to hear that a lot. And what's really frustrating is even after you learn exactly what it is, you're still going to hear that a lot.
And you're probably still going to do it, because when you're hammering out your first draft, you're going to say, she felt upset, or whatever it happens to be, and which is telling compared to showing. And what I've found is a really good trick, which we'll have to talk about some other time, is I just put a little note in there saying, show, don't tell, so that I know when I go, because I'm on a flow. And then when I go back, I know I'm going to fix that.
That is a great point. And one that I wanted to make is, it's okay when you're writing a draft to tell, to summarize something that made her feel bad when he walked out the door. But that is not strong writing. We need to show the emotion, and trust that our readers are smart enough.
They're going to get it.
Yeah. So what I do whenever I see that, because I can interrupt the flow too, instead of trying to fix it then, I highlight it. I don't just do little asterisks. I highlight it. So I know that all the highlighted little bits are bits that I have to come back in, and I have to find a way to show the emotion that I was telling about. Yeah. Some good writers will write beautifully. They will show beautifully, and then they'll tell, just in case you didn't get it.
Yeah.
They'll just come back in with a little summary, come back in to say what they really have just beautifully shown. That's weak writing. You're taking this beautiful thing you've just crafted in a great way, and then cheapening it.
Yeah, by saying, oh, and by the way, she was really upset.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't trust their own writing. But the reality is, if you show even reasonably well, readers, if they're intelligent enough to read, if they're intelligent enough to be there,
they'll figure it out. Well, and that's kind of like, even using dialogue to say, well, Bob, she was really upset when she left the room. Oh, really, Jim?
Yes.
I had no idea.
Exactly.
Yes. Did you see the way that her hair flew out behind her as she strode from the room?
Exactly.
No, as she strode angrily.
Angrily. Or she walked angrily from the room.
Oh, yes.
Yes. That's exactly it. I mean, when you give too much around it, you're both clouding it again to try to find where the meat of that scene or that interchange was, but it's just not necessary. So try not to tell, but also try not to summarize when you've already really shown. Yes. We're going to do just one other big one, and that is using the active voice.
Oh, this is hard for me.
This is hard for a lot of people.
It is a hard concept, and perhaps we should spend an entire podcast on it sometime, because a lot of people may be listening saying, I don't know what that means. What's active versus passive? I'm
going to give a quick little example, and then we will, because you're right. It's such an important topic. So if I was saying, John is sighing, the is makes it kind of passive. John sighed.
Right.
If I was to say, she was crying versus she cried. She was stalling versus
she was standing. She was standing.
So basically it's watching your was's and your is's. Now, a lot of people talk about gerunds, which are ing words, and they freak out because you're told not to use them. But you can absolutely use them when they're nouns. So walking is her favorite pastime. cooking relaxes her. Totally fine. But
That's
if you
telling though.
it is telling. But if you're in how to,
yes,
you know, and somebody's saying, what are 3 ways to eliminate stress? Cooking, walking, and
gardening.
Gardening, exactly. Perfectly fine. But you don't want to, if there's an is or a was in front of it, was cooking, was gardening. Now it becomes passive. So you want to say instead of she was gardening, she gardened.
Which is another thing to do a word search on is
yes,
was and is.
I have that on my list.
Is.
Was and is. So those are just a few tips. There's a million more. Absolutely, we're going to talk about in the future. But just some basic tips to make sure your writing is a little bit tighter, a little bit stronger. And you have been listening to The Art of Semi-Fiction. I am Robynne Miller.
And I'm Jane Daly.
Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe
and like.